Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Real Podcasters, the show where, as ever, we're talking all things movies, TV shows, video games, and a bunch of other things in no particular order. My name's Regan, as ever, and I'm joined once again by my decidedly not controversial co-host. It's Dan.
What is there controversial about me now?
Well, you haven't got the bat ears, you're not a secret government agent, you're not doing any of that sort of stuff, I'd like to think.
No. I'm very anti-government, so...
There was a bit of hesitation there. Are you actually saying that of your own free will?
Yeah.
He's lying. Great. Excellent. I've been harbouring a fugitive for like 66 episodes.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dan. Hello. So thank you very much for tuning into this podcast as ever. We really do appreciate it. Any kind of support would be absolutely terrific. You can follow us on YouTube and Spotify. You can subscribe, you can like, just any kind of support. We'd really appreciate that. Especially if we're talking about Batman this week, which we'll get to in a second. I could just see Dan's face just going, why did I sign up for this?
I don't know what you're on about.
I've got no idea. So,
clue.
No. So last week we spoke about Halo Reach as we were moving ever closer to the end of our Halo retrospective with 3 left. That's kind of freaking me out. This week we are celebrating Batman Day, which is a nationally registered holiday. You get days off from work. You get double pay if you do work it. You don't actually. It's a real shame.
Yeah, I was
really
going to say
that.
that is just ridiculous. I mean, yeah, it should absolutely exist, but for certain Batman things, yes. For this, maybe not.
What are you trying to suggest there, Dan?
Nothing.
Nothing. No, so we're celebrating Batman Day with something a little bit different. And before Dan starts deciding that this is all my fault, made a shout out to my good friend Paul, who was actually the person last year who suggested that I watch Batman 1943, not just for fun, but also for the purpose of this podcast, because he thought it would be quite funny to see our reaction. So shout out to Paul, right. You evil human being.
You're getting a reaction,
honestly,
Paul. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. We initially thought I could do this last year. No, there was no time to do it last year. So literally, come January, we're right, September, penciling it in, and we'll do Dark Knight at a later date because we actually want to do that, sort of. So obviously, we've spoken about Batman a couple of times on this podcast, both for the Matt Reeves film and a couple of other bits and bobs. We're certainly a fan of the character, to say the least. Yeah. And there's probably a reason as to why we picked this one of all of them. Like, there's a few Batman serials out there. We could have spoken about the Adam West one. Nah, why?
We'll just go with
we all know that.
We'll just go with the oldest one.
Yeah, well, it is literally the very first on-screen depiction of Batman since he was created in 1939. So this is actually quite important. And I will preface this by saying, I am not going to sit here and claim that this is like high art or secretly magnificent, because it isn't. By all accounts, it's bad. Okay, and I know for a while, we said to ourselves, you know what, we're not going to cover things we don't like. But then we wouldn't get the fun episodes. So occasionally I'll change it. And for the purpose of this, it seems like there is actually something quite interesting to discuss. Does it work in 2023? No, it really doesn't. It absolutely does not. So I totally get if people do not want to hear what we have to say on this. Again, I'm not going to defend it. And I know for sure, unless he's playing the long game, that Dan isn't either. I could be wrong. He's done this on a couple of occasions now. He's smirking, so it's entirely possible.
Thoughts to be confirmed.
Thoughts to be confirmed. Okay, so a little bit of background on this, because I assume that until I suggested this to you, you had absolutely no idea.
No, not in the absolute foggiest. The only time I'm aware of Batman serials is literally like the Adam West era. I didn't think there was any older than the Adam West era ones. But apparently I was wrong, because there is. It's from 1940 odd, during the height of World War II.
It is, yeah. So Batman as a character was introduced in 1939, and as I say, this is the first on-screen adaptation of the character in 1943, made during the height of World War II. So naturally, it's the kind of serial that absolutely works for its time as essentially military propaganda. That's literally what this series was. Which,
you know, I find it quite hilarious that, like, Captain America is like the face of America in Marvel in that first film, and yet Batman is the face of America war propaganda in this.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising, isn't it? You wouldn't think the person to go with is the one that skulks in like the alleyways at night.
Yeah, I mean, nothing says. I mean, clearly they think nothing says Americanism like Batman, but hey ho.
Well, no, because you think they would have used Superman instead, who literally his mantra is truth, justice, and the American way. That's just perfect for World War II. Probably because the flying and animations weren't quite up to snuff in the 1940s. I probably assume.
I mean, it is the 1940s, like, so.
Yeah. So obviously, because it's the 1940s, it's done by the Americans during World War II. There's a lot of stuff in here that references anti-Japanese sentiments. This is after Pearl Harbor, so obviously this is quite commonplace back then. It doesn't work now, and we will discuss it because it was just quite funny occasionally seeing messages from Dan where he's like, Regan, I'm 6 episodes in. What the hell? I wasn't expecting this. So before we get onto my general thoughts on this thing, we have to hear Dan's general thoughts on this thing. Over to Dan.
It's dull as dishwater. It does not work in 2023 for obvious reasons. Particularly the last episode, where I believe a certain slur is used like 6 times.
At least
6 times. Even the narrator says it at one point.
Yeah. We're obviously not going to say these slurs, obviously.
Well, yeah, obviously not.
No, we're not.
But it's just so boring. And I cannot believe that there was 15 of these things to watch. And for short episodes as well. Like, I think the longest one there is like the first episode, which is like 21 minutes or something like that. Even the last one is like 20 minutes. Every other episode in between is like going from maybe like 15 to 17 minutes, which is fine, I guess. But it would be even better if it just had some entertaining quality to it, rather than just this absolute bore fest of war propaganda Batman and bitch boy Robin going around just beating the crap out of gangsters and hunting down a Japanese spy.
Yeah, always happens in the final 2 or 3 minutes of every single chapter. It just suddenly devolves into just slapping.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I will say, for 1940s, the fight scenes are quite well choreographed for 1940s stuff. I must admit, they are quite entertaining. But everything else is just rubbish. It kind of goes back to what we were saying about Doctor Who, when you get episodes of Doctor Who that are purely just filler. A lot of these are just purely filler episodes. Like, it just... I honestly don't know how the Americans could sit and watch this back in the day, because imagine going to the theatre, watching a really good episode, and the next, like, 3 episodes after that are just boring as hell. You paying to see that absolute rubbish.
It's probably, I mean, back then, it was probably like the equivalent of us going to see like this big, giant blockbuster movie that we've never seen before. It just kind of takes your breath away because there wasn't anything else quite like it at the time. But at the same time,
I totally get.
By now, it's still a bit...
And where do I even begin on Batman? Where do I even start? The cowl does not look anything like a bat. It looks as if Batman has honestly just arose from hell. Like, he's got devil horns, man. He's not Batman, he's Devil Man. He's Satan, man. Like, honestly, you could put like some Evil Dead twist on it or something like that. You really could.
I'd honestly be surprised if there wasn't like a crossover in the comics between Batman and the Evil Dead. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be.
Oh God,
Surely.
I hope so.
I mean, it's the same studio. They're both bloody Warner Brothers. I'm pretty sure.
Like, I just didn't care for it at all, and the ending was honestly like a Bond film. It really was. Like, the villain falls prey to his own trap. I mean, come on. Yeah, this was like well before James Bond, but when you've seen the James Bonds before this, you just see nothing but James Bond. Except that Batman isn't part of MI6, he's just part of the US government for some stupid reason.
Well, there is reasons for that, which I'll get to.
Yeah, because it's wartime and Batman is the face of America, apparently. Along with Bitch Boy Robin. I'm going to keep calling him that.
Yes, you are. This is absolutely just going to be like a...
He is, he's so annoying. He really is.
I mean, that is kind of the thing for Robin, though, isn't it? He's always annoying.
I just want him to get eaten by an alligator, I really do. Yeah, you can tell I'm really liking this cereal. God.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, I'm pretty similar on you. I mean, I'm slightly more positive, but only in the sense of, like, what this serial represents for the future as opposed to what this serial actually is.
That is literally the only thing I like about it. The fact it's the first appearance of Batman, and then it goes on to influence however many other things. I mean, hundreds of bloody years. Let's face it. You know,
yes,
like
future.
Adam
it can
West.
time travel.
Bloody all the Michael Keaton Batman's games, TV shows, merchandise. Years in the making. Absolute years in the making.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say it's particularly good. But we're not
really
exactly discussing the merits of that. You know. I mean, as I say, the serial adds quite a bit to the mythos that literally every single iteration of the Batman character, it does lift from this in a few ways. Yeah, obviously extremely offensive by today's standards. At the same time, given it's from 1943 and the context as to how it's made, I shouldn't expect anything else. Yeah. But at the same time, it's
very much of its time, I think.
Yes, it's very much a product of its time in a way that other Batman stories aren't really. Like, even the Adam West series is very much a product of the 1960s. But you could absolutely just suddenly turn on the TV and decide, you know what, I'm going to watch a bit of Adam West Batman. And despite some really, like, cringy humour every now and again, it actually still works really well, especially the movie. I really love the movie from 1966. It's actually borderline brilliant and one of the best Batman films ever, despite the fact it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Robin, pass you my anti-shark repellent. Like, oh, for God's sake, seriously.
Yeah, obviously. And I do, I appreciate the flourishes that would be expanded upon, especially with the Adam West series, which definitely feels like it's a satire of this serial deliberately in a few ways.
Yeah.
But would then take it in a more comedic route. And it worked. In terms of the casting, though, I think the majority of people wouldn't know of Lewis Wilson, who plays Bruce Wayne / Batman.
Nope.
He's all right. I mean, there's some people who absolutely despise him, but I think it's purely just because of him in the costume. I actually think he works quite well as Bruce Wayne, especially with the egotistical playboy facade that Bruce Wayne always puts on.
It's funny when you mention that, like, the influence on Batman. It goes with Bruce Wayne as well. I mean, obviously the same person, but just under that mask as Bruce Wayne. But when you get Bruce Wayne in this, he's like the egotistical playboy, as you say. But in the other, even like the Dark Knight Trilogy, I mean, yeah, that is still there, but it is not as much, I think. Like, compared to this, he's nothing.
Yeah,
really.
I think...
Like, he's just an absolute egomaniac in this.
Yeah, I think in future versions, they're able to make him still likable. Whereas in this, you really just want to punch him in the face, which is what criminals are always doing, but except you want to punch him in both facades, not just the bad side, but also the Bruce side.
Is there any character in this serial that you just don't want to punch in the face?
The alligators.
Yeah, besides the alligators.
Maybe Alfred. I like Alfred in this. But then it's a bit difficult to not do a good Alfred. I don't think that's ever happened yet. I'm saying off the top of my head, I'm trying to immediately think. I don't think there is.
Not that I can think of, no.
But then this serial does introduce a certain aspect of Alfred that wasn't used in the comics. Mostly just in the design of him. In the comics, he was decidedly larger and smaller. In this, obviously, he's tall, he's thin. Classically British with the mustache. That started here. And
the classic British
Michael Caine version. Yes, and then is used throughout the rest of the comics. So I actually really like that. I do actually like William Strauss as Alfred. He's actually quite good. If just a little bit, he's a little bit loopy. He doesn't really seem like he's there all the time. It seems like, oh, I'm actually surprised I'm on the street wearing shoes. What on earth is going on?
Yeah, like, I just... There's parts of that I'm like, is Alfred really Alfred, or did Bruce Wayne just get some, like, absolute nut job that's like a servant?
I wouldn't be shocked if Dr. Daka actually got his zombie tech from Bruce Wayne and Alfred's actually the zombie the entire time.
Or even better, it's just like a really terrible 1940s Scooby-Doo episode and Dr. Daka is actually Alfred.
I wouldn't be shocked. Actually. I would that'd be absolutely fine with me.
It wouldn't be for me.
Douglas... No. You've also got Douglas Croft as Dick Grayson / Robin. He's fine, but he really lacks the charisma that Burt Ward brings to the character in the Adam West series for sure. And for the most part, he kind of just stands off in the corner and occasionally butting in to ask when he can suit up again. Which I like that as a concept if it was like... Bruce doesn't really want to be Batman, but then Dick Grayson's just like, oh, I always want to be Robin. If this was a completely different serial done now, there could be something interesting with that. But this is the 1940s.
Yeah, he's just
we don't do subtlety.
He's very much just in the background do not do for nuance. A lot of stuff.
Yeah,
the only time he really gets anything good is when he's just captured by gangsters and he has to be saved, or he just does something stupid that results in Batman having to save him.
And he just punches his way out every single time. They are the most incompetent superheroes of the 1940s, which is ironic because there isn't any. Yeah. So I mean, the bar is pretty low. It's like, even though there's like 7 of you, you're still at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Robin is at number 8. So obviously, you've mentioned the costumes. The Robin one's actually fine.
The Robin one looks quite similar to what it would like, later on. It still looks pretty much the same with a few alterations, bar the Batman and Robin one, which is just
it's beautiful.
No, because you never
so
see anything
much rubber and spandex.
Other than spandex crotch shots.
And nipples.
Yeah, and nipples. Why is that a thing?
And rubber abs and rubber pecs and everything.
Yeah, like, why are rubber pecs a thing?
Because obviously George Clooney and everyone obviously didn't have any, clearly.
They clearly wanted more eroticism in Batman and Robin then.
Yeah. So yeah, the Batsuit. Just to save off another rant from you on the bat ears. Actually, no, please rant about the bat ears again, if you feel so compelled.
Like, honestly, from the first time you see it, I just did not see Batman. I just saw devil horns, literally, and I was like, "This is not a Batman at all. You don't look anything like Batman. The only thing that says you're Batman is your stupid spandex costume with the Bat logo printed on it. The cowl looks ridiculous. It's droopy.
It's true.
It is. It's just
Yeah,
it's like they
it
made it of paper mache and they just put it on his head.
It does make him look sad pretty much all the time that he's on screen. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna save the day.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like emo Batman.
I'm vengeance.
Like, maybe
I'm
this is why
knight.
Batman is just like such an emo. It's like just different like eras of him. It starts off by looking exceptionally sad, but not deliberately. In this case, it is absolutely deliberate because the cowl just looks silly.
Yeah, I'm not gonna defend it, Dan. It's fine.
Just like there is a lot to rant about this, and it's not just Batman. Like can I give you my rating of what I think of this film?
-4, probably.
1.
Ooh, I was gonna give it a 2. Actually, no, I might put it down to a 1. Let's be realistic.
1. It is just, granted the Adam West Batmans are just ludicrous, but they work.
Yeah.
Ludicrous in this does not, because at one point it literally becomes like a Universal Monsters Frankenstein film with a Japanese spy making zombies, which is just absolutely ridiculous. It does not work in the slightest. It's just silly. Like, how do you go from, like, the whole... Like, generally as a whole, I don't mind the fact that it's set in, like, wartime, and that Batman is basically a secret agent that has to hunt down an Imperial spy to save, basically, the world. I don't mind that at all. Yeah, to save America. I don't mind that at all, because it works for the time. It's a thing of its time. It's a product of its time. But then it just gets to, oh yeah, I'm now some mad scientist who's going to create zombies to do his bidding. Like, what? Whatever happened to just sending goons to go stop Batman, which is what it started off with, and then he's just like, oh, the goons aren't really working out, maybe I'll just create zombies. I'm like, what? Really? Seriously?
It's interesting how... Yeah, it also kind of freaked me out when I first saw it. It's like, oh, okay, there's zombies in this. Okay, great. We're now got the supernatural in a Batman series.
Yeah,
of all
like,
things,
it just
I didn't
does
think
not
I needed.
Work at all. It's like, well, it's maybe time for a bit of a tonal shift. Like, get lost.
So obviously our main villain is Daka, who is an agent of the Japanese government whose evil scheme, prepare yourselves, is to develop a gun using radium to dissolve any form of matter. You would just use acid. Just saying. We'll just dissolve it immediately. Plot end. Finn.
I mean...
Well, ear.
Again, you're going with, like, the Bond kind of villain here.
Which is odd, because the Bond films weren't even out
Yeah,
by
exactly.
this
I think
point.
like, the first one that came out was, like, in the 60s, which was, like, Dr. No or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was Dr. No in the 60s, yeah. God, that's a film. But,
It was
no,
indeed.
I would have liked it to be a lot more interesting, considering this is the height of World War II as well. You'd think that, like, this Japanese spy would be doing everything to... the radium gun's fine, but, like, break into somewhere that has, like, American secrets. Don't just use it to threaten America with, oh, I'm going to dissolve anybody who tries to stop me. Ooh. Like, it's more threatening the fact you're going to steal data of potentially how the US is going to win the war. Like, it's just so muddled up, and it just infuriated me in the end.
I could tell.
Like, it's not the absolute worst thing that I've seen, but I mean, it's not brilliant in any way, shape, or form. As I say, it's just boring as hell. Like, the first episode was fine. It set it up fine, and then like. I've really lost interest until episode 5, I think, when the zombie stuff starts coming in a bit. Because there's a scene which I quite liked, even though it's absolutely ludicrous. But that's just me and my tastes.
And you do indeed have a couple of tastes.
Yeah, I do. Where basically they smuggle this, like, undead Japanese agent in who gives them, like, a bunch of information who dies. So I'm like, there's a Frankenstein Japanese agent now.
I mean, it's the best form of exposition if it comes from a recently deceased person who wakes up, tells them the plot, and then dies.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
like he tells them the information and then just sinks back into the coffin. I'm like, okay then. Like, oh my goodness, it's
Yeah, obviously, this serial isn't going to be winning any points with its villain. I mean, J. Carroll Knight plays Daka, and he's fine, mildly threatening.
He's fine.
Obviously, there's the elephant in the room. He's not actually Japanese. They've basically done a Sean Connery in a future Batman film. No, a future Bond film. Was it Sean Connery? I'm sure it is. Isn't there like one of the Bond films when he's in Japan and he has to make himself look a bit less Bond? I'm pretty certain that's the case here as well.
It's a bit. It's a one where Donald Pleasance plays the villain Blofeld, and basically Bond has to go undercover by getting like Japanese like prosthetics put on him to make him look Japanese. It's just painful.
I mean, yeah.
It's painful. I mean, it's not as painful as this, but it's not far off.
I was about to say it was pretty shocking. Like immediately, I'm like, yeah, I can tell this is from the 40s.
Yeah,
Hell,
like
you could tell.
But it's as you say though, like it is an absolute thing of its time, and I think back then, yeah, it probably was entertaining. And I do have my own theory of why they went with the likes of Batman, and I think that was to actually appeal more to children, really. I mean, because again, this is the height of World War II. It's a frightening time for not just America, for everybody involved, regardless. I mean, bar Germany, because, you know, bad people in that particular era, anyway.
Well done, Dan. Save.
Yeah, good save. But, no, I actually think that it was aimed towards kids more than adults, really.
Okay.
Because it just kind of takes their mind off the whole thing of war, because that word war to a kid is like terrifying, which I imagine it was absolutely a horrific time. So why not like make this crime fighting vigilante like the face of America? Because it seems like a very good idea.
That's definitely something that went with. I don't know if it would have appealed more to kids, because I always took it as it was kind of the appeal for people who hadn't enlisted yet, and to see this serial of the enemies coming in and here is someone who's going to fight them at every single turn, to kind of inspire them. Even though I'm sure at the time you were kind of forced to enlist.
Yeah,
although I can't really remember much when it comes to the American side of things of enlisting for war. I know other countries around the world.
All I really remember from my days in history class was that you know, like all countries had their ways of like propaganda. You know, I mean, Britain was like, you know, women doing their parts in bomb factories, etc. So they made like things to show that women could actually be involved in war as well, and kids would go around collecting scrap and stuff like that to put in factories and make bullets.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, it's interesting that you use like the crime-fighting vigilante as. It's just nuts, the fact that you use someone like Batman, the guy who just prowls in the night and takes out criminals. I just find that
to be
funny.
honest though, that's something I want to address in a little bit, because I do have my own feelings on that, especially for the way these things are done, even by today's standards, by newer films, which I'll get to. In terms of the other thing that this serial introduces is the Batcave, or the Bat's Cave.
I do actually really like the Batcave set.
I also really like it. It's really annoying how that's probably the best thing out of this. But also, you gotta love in like the very first frames, and he's just sat there at his bat's desk, and there's just a bobbing bat. Just like as a shadow on the wall, it's like, yes, this is a real bat. Look at it. As much like an actual bat does, it just bobs up and down.
I laughed so much at that scene because it just reminded me of one of the Universal Monsters Dracula films. I think it's Son of Dracula, and there's a scene where basically Dracula turns into a bat, and the scene is this rubber bat on a string going over like a swamp. It just reminded me so much of that. Like the string bat. It's like, yes, this is a real bat. I love how he just
not
sits at the
convincing
desk as
at
well.
all.
Like, like everything has just evolved so much. Like you've got the most generic looking desk, and he's just sat in like this really like intimidating way as well.
He's thinking about the rugby scores. He's thinking about the football scores. Now he's thinking about beating the hell out of people again. Probably you wouldn't actually be able to tell with his sad cowl face.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think
Sad
that he's
man.
about to go kick the absolute living bat out of people.
He's kicking the bat out of people.
Yeah. Him and
There's a song in there somewhere.
BB Robin.
Yeah. So this introduces the Batcave for the first time. Wasn't used in the comics. Then after that, the writers were like, "Oh my god, this is a genius idea because he needs a lair because Batman hasn't got a lair yet." We don't really have the Batmobile. We just have a car.
I love how it's just the most stereotypical American 40s car as well. Like,
But if you think about it, right,
it blends in.
you've just got to love. Yeah, you got to love though how its version of a disguise is better than the actual Batsuit.
Yeah.
In that, if he's just Bruce Wayne, the roof is off. If he's in the back as Batman and Robin,
I find
the roof
that
is up.
whole disguise thing so funny because it's not just with Batman. It's with like Superman and Clark Kent and Aquaman. It's like, oh, you just missed Superman. He was right here. Oh, I'm sure he knows I was here. Because they do it like at the end of the episode, don't they? It's like Bruce Wayne comes. It's like, oh, Bruce, what are you doing here? Batman was just here. Did you not see him? I'm like, oh, I must have just missed him. And then like you're expecting like the cheeky wink at the camera or something like that. Thankfully, it doesn't.
I mean, I wouldn't have been shocked.
I wouldn't.
But
have been
again, it's
shocked.
like, especially considering that there wasn't really anything else out there like this, I wouldn't have been shocked if that sort of thing did happen because there's no reason why they couldn't. It's not like all of a sudden people thought, oh no, it's a terrible idea, we wouldn't do that, when you haven't done anything else. So I'm probably glad we didn't get the Batwink, quite frankly.
The Batwink.
The Batwink.
Yeah, I mean, this entire serial is just one big batastrophe, to be honest.
A catastrophe.
Yeah, batastrophe.
You know, I've been trying to think of the title for this episode. I might have to use that.
The batastrophe.
Yeah. I'm saying it now.
Like, it's not that every single episode is bad, but it did not need to be
No,
15
it's just
episodes
bad.
long.
Oh, no, it didn't. It did not have to be a few minutes longer than Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Like, because half of
I
those
know which one
episodes
I
are
would
literally
rather
just
watch.
like filler episodes, and you just get so sick of the cliffhanger thing as well. And I mean, it does work because it's of its time, but like it's just so annoying. You don't see it in films nowadays, like at all, because you'd just be peed off in the end. Because it's like, join us next week at this theatre. Will Robin escape? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, God, I hope not.
I do have to wonder how expensive it was to go and see this in a theatre,
Yeah,
whether it was
like-
like the kind of thing where it's like classified as like a short before another film, or if it's just you come in here exclusively for 20 minutes and then leave.
Yeah.
Because I'd hate that.
Because I
Absolutely despise that.
I kind of be peed off if I had to pay to go see 17 minutes of a film and then go away and then go back next week. I'd be peed off. I'd rather go to the local diner or something like that. Like, bloody Nora.
Yeah. You've also got, obviously, as we've alluded to, Batman is an agent of the US government. So
Yeah.
this was very much put in place because censors at the time didn't like the idea of just an individual like taking the law into their own hands. So at that point I questioned, right, then why are you adapting Batman? Why don't you just do something else then, if that's the case? That's like saying, you know what, we're in the 1950s, we're really offended by the creatures known as bats. Let's adapt Batman, but do something else with them.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't. You would just do something else. So that I find is quite funny. And also because of the extremely tight budget. Well, I say tight budget, no budget.
Yeah, it is absolutely a micro budget. But again, you know, this is the height of like World War II. All money is being pooled into resources.
Yeah, it'd be quite awkward if all the money was going to this and not the war effort.
Yeah, it would be a very,
Though
very
it might have
different world,
amounted
I
to
think.
like a better serial, but we might have been gone. So who knows?
I think I'll take the crappy cereal over like the future. You know?
Yeah. To us, there was a lot of moments where this reminded me of the Spider-Man series from the 1970s with Nicholas Hammond, which I really like that series, even if it's absolutely god awful in places. Because that also has like, okay, we'll bring a few things from the comics. Should we have him go up against Green Goblin? Nah. What about Doc Ock? Nah. Let's just have him go up against gangs every single week because he can't do anything else. Oh, and he can't swing from buildings because we can't actually get a person to do that without like a license or anything.
So he's not Spider-Man. He's just a man named Spider.
No, it's just, you know, in the old, in the PS2 video game of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
You know how he stands like that. He's just like bobbing it along.
Oh, please tell me that
I'm
he
pretty
does that.
certain came from the 1970s one when he just walks around like this. It's as if he's like at a disco and he's constantly doing the I don't know what it is. I don't go to discos or any crap like that. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean.
doing the 60s Spider-Man.
Doing the 60s Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, as negative as I am towards this, like, there are generally
which I wouldn't have expected anything more.
there are some good moments. I mean, again, the fight stuff is good, to be honest.
The fight scenes I do
1940s
actually
stuff,
quite
it
like.
is really good. It's really well done, considering, like, you do actually believe quite a bit of it. And I kind of like the fact that it goes from... You've still got that, like, classic American gangster look in the henchman, which I really do like, but even if it is a bit kind of odd that it's not like other Japanese henchmen, it's just American henchmen, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that kind of seems a bit pointless. Like, I'm going up against the Americans. Help me, Americans.
Yeah, like...
Thanks.
Considering that Americans are very patriotic as well, you'd think they'd do anything to, like, not side with the enemy, but yet here's an example. It's like, oh, well, we'll just... go with this guy because why the hell not?
Yeah, I won't say it breaks its own rules, but it breaks its own rules with this. Where it's like, we have to fight against these types of people, watch them as they side with these types of people to fight someone else, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What are you trying to say here?
Yeah.
And the last bit of changes before I get on to, like, some other things. The utility belts are not used, again, because budget, which I am convinced this is why in the Adam West serial, he always happens to have something in his utility belt to fight the next thing after the titles roll. I'm convinced it's because it was never used in this.
Is just...
non-existent.
I mean, Adam West just has absolutely everything that he needs. I mean, anti-shark repellent being the one, you never know what situation you're going to get into as a crime-fighting bat.
And he just happens to have the shark repellent bat spray, even though he has no idea prior to that he's going to be going anywhere near the water.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it never hurts to be equipped, I guess.
See, I think it would have been funny if he had bat spray for a different animal, and he goes up against the shark and he realizes, oh crap, I can't use it. Bugger.
You know, like, it's just in case, like, he falls
In his
into,
bat
like,
voice.
I don't know, like, he's up against the penguin or something like that, and he goes to, like, the zoo, and the penguin just pulls the lever and goes in a
Batman
trap.
in the zoo.
Yeah, and then, like, you know, there's a tiger.
It's
It's
a
like,
bat
Robert,
zoo.
pass me my anti-tiger repellent.
And it's just catnip or something.
It just seems to be that Robin is just, like, the mule, really. It's not even Batman
he
who has
is.
all this stuff. It's just Robin with, like, a gigantic, like, rucksack on the back. Just full of, like, useless gadgets.
I'm nearly at the crime scene. I'm nearly there.
Like, God, it's just full of, like, useless crap.
Well, see, at least this version isn't full of useless crap. It's just useless crap, as it turns out.
No, it's just full of equally useless characters.
I mean, yeah. So obviously we've spoken at length about how this is essentially propaganda to push people to join the war effort in the 1940s. This certainly isn't the first time that like the media industry has tried to use that sort of thing to push something else. Like, let's face this, if you think about it, post World War II into like say 1970s and 1980s, what was the most popular genre in film? It's fairly obvious when like you think about it. It was the Western. They were everywhere because that sort of setting was genius for the industry to use, because all it did was showcase the little people standing up to injustice and evil at every single step. It was the little person that would make a difference. That is every single Western.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I hadn't thought about.
Though. Like, it's no matter how many different times you tell the same story, it's always like the little guy standing up to like corruptness, whatever else. Like, it's always the little people who end up winning. Which I suppose is
and it's
why they adopted it to, like war propaganda, because, you do your part to potentially do it for your country kind of thing,
Yeah. And there was always that underlying fear that something else could happen next. So the Western was used to kind of ease that a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, they were popular for decades. Obviously, they died off because that fear, might have still been there, but not nearly as much. And then obviously the Vietnam War happens. You get tons of films around that. And then, of course, you have the superhero boom of the early 2000s coming off the back of, and I know this is a horribly timed episode all of a sudden because of this, but coming off the back of 9/11 and the start of the War on Terror, tons of genres completely shifted because of this new sentiment, and superhero films were taken in a far more serious route that's still been going on. Although given this year, I feel like we might be at a point where that might actually change, finally.
Yeah, I think it's heading
but it's
for a
just
change.
interesting how technically this Batman serial works for the time but not now, but yet the logistics of why it's being done is still used now, which is kind of weird. Like, even look at the Batman from last year with his depiction of the Riddler. It's essentially political propaganda with him, and that's the same for every other version. So, as I say, I'm not going to sit here and say that this serial's good, because it's not. It's definitely got its moments, as we've both said. Like, the fight sequences are actually quite good.
It's got its influences. You can, for a first-time Batman on-screen type deal, because it absolutely is. This is, again, which makes it quite special in ways. It's the first appearance of Batman on cinema. But it's just one of those things. You could say the same for a lot of other kind of films with this. That, when you always get that first time thing, it's always that just puts it in a better direction. Which is what happens when you look at the Batman we've got now, compared to you go from like.
Well, it depends which one, because we don't know which is canon anymore.
yeah, okay, but you've got the likes of, you've got like US government Batman, and then it goes into like campy over the top Batman, but it still works. And then you go in a bit darker with like Tim Burton's one, and then you get Batman Forever, which returns back to its campy roots, and it's just absolutely god awful. And then again, you're sticking with campiness, and then you go in this really dark and gritty way with the Dark Knight Trilogy, and then the most recent one done by Matt Reeves, which I absolutely adore. It's really true to the Arkham games, I think, especially with the whole Riddler thing as well. I mean, I love the Riddler in the new one. It's just scary, I think. What did you do?
We have different thoughts on the Batman, which we've already said before. We've already got 2 episodes bloody done for that last year. I can't believe we did 2 episodes of that. But yeah, I can definitely echo a lot of your sentiments there. I think it's still important to, the Batman mythos. If we didn't get this, I'd be very curious to see whether this still would have actually, whether this character still would have gone on, because that's kind of the same with Batman 89 as well. If that didn't work,
I think if you didn't have this and they still made the character, you wouldn't have as much Batman as you would nowadays. I think it would be very limited. I think, and it would have probably gone in a totally different direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you probably would have ended up going in like the Superman kind of direction, I think. Whereas you have like the two personalities. You got Clark Kent and you got Superman, but you got Bruce Wayne, you got Batman. But those two personas work in their own way in what would become Bruce Wayne and Batman. Like as you say, like he's an absolute egomaniac in this, and it's not that he's not an egomaniac in the other films. I mean, hell, in Dark Knight, his egomania makes him, quite unlikable in ways because he just focuses on himself. I mean, the stuff with like Harvey Dent and stuff like that at the table. It's like, oh, do you think they're gonna mind if we put these two tables together? Oh, I wouldn't think so. I own the building. It's like, all right, show off.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not gonna suddenly sit here and say this is actually really good because it really isn't. But at the same time, we kind of need it.
It's serviceable, I think.
Yes, it's serviceable. I've seen way worse from Batman, I think. I don't know if I prefer this to Batman and Robin. It would be really awkward if I suddenly said, this is actually better than Batman and Robin, because that is offensive in its own ways.
Yeah. I mean, at least Batman and Robin just knows it's been absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take itself seriously. It just knows it's going to be a dumb film. I mean, even from like the
Whereas this is
get-go, and it's just like crotch shot, butt shot, nipple shot.
This doesn't have any of that.
No, it doesn't.
Real or rubber. And that's why it doesn't work. No. But at the very least, this series does give us the Adam West series, which is just peak cinema, frankly.
It would go on to influence, again, what I mentioned before. Like, you look at, it's 1940, and then years later, I mean, the Adam West stuff was 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So, fair few years. But, during that time, you obviously had comics and stuff like that. Then you'd go on to the Adam West ones. You'd go, the film and the TV serial. Then you go into the dark and grittier one. Then you get like the Arkham games and stuff like that. So it's amazing how one thing that just had one serial goes on to influence and create so much with just one character.
And it's interesting because it's stemming from something that isn't particularly good to begin with. But then I think if this was absolutely amazing, I don't think we would have had nearly as many afterwards because it would probably be difficult to top. This ain't that good at all. So at least there's things that you can improve on, there's things that you can take, and you can absolutely improve on it. And for sure, it did.
Yeah.
This might be the first version of Batman. It certainly isn't the best, but it's necessary. Even if it's still in the context of a very awkwardly timed story that doesn't work in 2023.
No.
At all.
No, it doesn't. All. It's not one part
but
of
it. No, but I think that sums up our thoughts on Batman 1943. Major thank you to my good friend Paul for suggesting this absolute nightmare of a thing to watch. He didn't tell me it was 4 hours long. I think at that point I would have been like, no, I would rather discuss Batman and Robin.
No, I wouldn't rather, to be honest. I don't know. They're both equally bad.
Watch the yeah. But thank you very much for listening to us just rant just a little bit on bat ears and bat slurs and all that sort of stuff and Bat's Cave. There's a lot of fun stuff in this, actually, as it turns out.
The good, the bad, and the absolutely batastrophe cereal.
Anytime we say cereal, I'm just thinking of the other cereal. It's making me really, really hungry now. Next week, we will be concluding our take back on... take back? No, I'm going to reword all that.
Take back?
I'm just making up words now. Next week, we're going to be concluding our retrospective on Pirates of the Caribbean with the extremely long, extremely grey, extremely tentacly... At World's End.
Tentacly.
So that should be an interesting one to talk about. I think we're both... I'm very curious as to your thoughts on it now, because
It's a funny thing you mention that, because I'll actually be rewatching it today.
even better than,
because
and it's actually
rewatched,
somehow shorter than Batman 1943, even though it's unbelievably long for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite.
It's
4
longer
hours.
than the Kraken.
It's not quite 4 hours, but boy, does it feel like 4 hours.
Yeah. And I could also ask you what's coming up on the next episode of Graveyard Chit Chat, but that's kind of funny because it's literally the one we mentioned last week, because this is just how awkward the schedules have been. Because initially I thought we would have recorded for Graveyard Chit Chat before I went to Scotland or before we recorded this, but that's not how life works. That's all.
Yeah, I can't reveal it.
Even though we already know.
Well, yeah, we're doing Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, but obviously the next episode...
You don't need to tell us the next one, it's fine. I can wait until tomorrow. As of when we are recording that one.
Oh, I can't wait for that one.
No, so you got Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End and Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. That's a bit of a fun week, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. Until then, it's goodbye from Dan.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.